Flies knew her secret before anyone else did. They circled Amara's headscarf in lazy, hungry loops as she bent over the bolt of Ankara fabric, her gloved fingers tracing the golden patterns with practiced precision. The midday heat pressed against the tin roof of Mama Ngozi's shop like a heavy palm, but Amara's long sleeves never came off, not even when sweat darkened the fabric beneath her arms. Mama Ngozi had learned to breathe through her mouth whenever the cursed girl came shopping, a skill she'd mastered over the past 3 years since Amara's condition had worsened beyond all medical hope. "That blue one," Amara whispered, pointing to a fabric that would hide stains well. Her voice barely rose above the buzz of the metal fan that did nothing but push the thick air around. "How much per yard?" 2,000 naira, Mama Ngozi replied from behind her counter, one hand pressed delicately to her nose as if checking for dust. "But sister, are you sure about that color? It's very practical." The word hung in the air like incense, sweet and cloying. Practical. The polite way to say suitable for someone who smells like death. Amara nodded, already reaching for her worn purse when the shop door slammed open with enough force to rattle the glass bottles of palm oil on the shelves. A man filled the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, with the confident stride of someone who owned whatever room he entered. Dust motes danced in the shaft of sunlight behind him. The smell hit him immediately. Amara watched his nostrils flare, saw his step falter for just a moment as the sweet, sick scent of rotting flesh mixed with antiseptic reached him. This was the moment they always ran. This was when she became invisible again. But Michael Okonkwo, though she didn't know his name yet, simply closed the door behind him and nodded toward the proprietor. "Afternoon, Mama. I need something for my sister's wedding." Mama Ngozi's eyes darted between her two customers like a trapped animal. The unspoken rule of her shop was that when Amara came in, other customers waited outside until the air cleared. But this stranger seemed oblivious to the silent protocol that had kept her business running. "I can come back," Amara said quickly, already folding the fabric with hands that shook slightly. "I don't want to." "Sister, you were here first," the man said, his voice carrying the rolling accent of Onitsha traders. "I can wait." The words struck Amara like cold water. You were here first, as if she were just another customer, as if she had rights to space and time like everyone else. She looked up then, really looked at him, and found steady brown eyes that held no judgment, no disgust, no pity, just simple human courtesy. Mama Ngozi coughed meaningfully. "Perhaps we could." "No rush," said, settling against the doorframe with the patience of a man who had nowhere more important to be. "Take your time, sister." As Amara's trembling fingers counted out wrinkled naira notes, she caught herself stealing glances at this strange man who hadn't fled, who hadn't made excuses, who stood there as if the air weren't thick with the smell of her shame. When a person shows you who they are the first time, believe them, her grandmother used to say. But Amara had learned not to believe in small kindnesses. They usually came with a price she couldn't afford to pay. Still, as she walked toward the door with her carefully wrapped fabric, she found herself pausing, waiting, hoping for just a moment longer in the presence of someone who saw her as human. What kind of man didn't flinch from the scent of living death? The shed behind her family's compound wasn't meant for living. It had been built to store yams and palm oil, but 12 years ago, when the smell became unbearable, it became Amara's world. 4 corrugated iron walls, a single window that faced the bush, and a door her mother knocked on but rarely opened. Tonight, like every night, Amara sat before her cracked mirror, performing the ritual that kept her human. The removal was always the worst part. Her fingers trembled as she unwrapped the headscarf, layers of fabric that had absorbed the day's seepage. The wig came next. Synthetic hair glued to a mesh cap, soaked daily in antiseptic that burned her remaining scalp but couldn't mask what lay beneath. In the lamplight, her reflection was a horror movie brought to life. The necrotizing fasciitis had taken everything from her hairline to the crown of her head. What remained wasn't skin. It was a landscape of craters and ridges, angry red tissue that wept constantly. The largest crater, behind her left ear, was deep enough to hide a coin. Yellow fluid pooled there daily, thick as palm oil but smelling like death itself. She dipped a cloth in antiseptic and began the cleaning, biting her lip against the pain. Each touch was fire, but infection meant death. She'd learned that lesson at 14. The memory always came during cleaning time. 12 years earlier, University of Nigeria Teaching Hospital. "Mama, it's just a small cut," 14-year-old Amara had whispered, touching the scratch behind her ear where a rusty nail had caught her during market day. "It will heal." But the cut didn't heal. It grew. Within days, the skin around it turned black and began to smell. Her mother, panicked, had carried her to the hospital on her back like a child. "Necrotizing fasciitis," the doctor had said, the words foreign and terrifying. "Flesh-eating bacteria. We need to operate immediately." The surgery lasted 8 hours. They cut away everything infected, skin, tissue, pieces of her skull. When she woke, half her head was wrapped in bandages that leaked constantly. "Will she be normal?" her mother had asked. The doctor's silence was answer enough. 3 more surgeries followed, skin grafts that failed, antibiotics that made her vomit for weeks. Each time, the doctors promised improvement. Each time, they lied. "The infection is contained," they finally said, "but the damage is permanent. The tissue will never fully heal. She'll need constant care, constant cleaning, and the odor." They trailed off, unable to meet her mother's eyes. Back in the shed, adult Amara finished cleaning and began the reconstruction. Fresh gauze first, taped carefully over the worst craters. Then the medicated padding that absorbed drainage. The wig came next, positioned to hide the worst scarring. Finally, the headscarf, wrapped tight enough to contain everything, but not so tight it caused more damage. Each layer was armor. Each layer was a lie. She stood before the mirror, fully wrapped, and saw what the world saw. A woman in traditional dress, modest and unremarkable. Only her eyes gave away the truth, hollowed by years of shame, dulled by the daily weight of being unwanted. The suitors' faces haunted her during these moments. 7 men who had shown interest over the years, drawn by her reputation for fine sewing or her family's modest wealth. Emeka had lasted the longest, 3 visits before the smell drove him away. She'd watched him try to hide his disgust, seen his nostrils flare when she moved too close. The night he vomited during dinner, she'd locked herself in this shed and didn't emerge for a week. "It's not your fault," her mother had said through the door. "God has a plan." But what kind of God cursed a 14-year-old girl with rotting flesh? What kind of plan included decades of isolation? The others had been quicker to flee. Chidi lasted 1 afternoon. Ikenna didn't even finish his palm wine. Each rejection carved deeper into her heart until she stopped hoping entirely. 26 years old and already dead to the world of love. She blew out the lamp and lay on her narrow cot, listening to the night sounds beyond her thin walls. Somewhere in the main compound, her younger sister was probably choosing jewelry for another date, another man who found her beautiful and whole. Amara touched her wrapped head and felt the familiar dampness already seeping through the fresh bandages. By morning, she'd need to change everything again. The cycle never ended. Sleep brought dreams of clear skin and clean air, of dancing without shame and kissing without fear. She always woke disappointed. Dawn came too soon, bringing the daily choice: stay hidden or face the world, stay safe or risk another day of whispers and disgust. She chose the world, as she always did, not from hope that had died years ago, but from stubborn survival. She needed fabric for customers. She needed the small income her sewing provided. She needed to feel human, even if humanity rejected her. Wrapped and armored, she stepped into the morning light and walked toward the market, unaware that today would be different. Unaware that a trader from Onitsha was already waiting at Mama Ngozi's shop, asking when the woman with the beautiful eyes usually arrived. Some fates, even the cursed ones, hold surprises. The morning sun turned Ogbede Market into a furnace of voices, colors, and sweat. Amara moved through the maze of stalls like smoke, visible but untouchable, weaving between the crush of bodies while maintaining that invisible barrier she'd perfected over the years. 3 feet, always 3 feet between her and everyone else. Close enough to conduct business, far enough that the smell wouldn't hit them full force. She was examining yams at Mama Adana's stall when she felt eyes on her. not the usual quick glances followed by whispered prayers or disgusted head shakes. These eyes lingered, studied. When she turned, her heart did that dangerous flutter thing it had been doing for 3 days straight. Michael stood 2 stalls away, haggling with a spice vendor, but his attention kept drifting to her. When their eyes met, he smiled, not the polite, forced stretch of lips most people managed, but something genuine that reached his eyes and made tiny lines appear at the corners. "Amara!" Mama Adonna's voice cut through her distraction. "You want these yams or not? I have other customers." Heat flooded her cheeks. She'd been staring like a schoolgirl with her first crush. Fumbling for her money, she paid quickly and turned to leave, but Michael was suddenly there, close enough that she could smell his aftershave mixing with the market's symphony of scents. "Good morning," he said, adjusting the leather bag slung across his shoulder. "Busy day for shopping." "Every day is busy in the market." The words came out sharper than she intended. Defensive, she softened her tone. "I mean, yes, many people need things, including me." His smile widened. "I'm hopeless at this. Everything looks the same to me, but my customers in Onitsha expect quality." He gestured toward a fabric stall where bold Ankara prints swayed in the breeze like festival banners. "Mind if I walk with you? Maybe you could help me understand what makes good fabric good?" Amara's steps faltered. Help him? Men didn't ask her for help. They held their breath, completed transactions as quickly as possible, and escaped before the smell could cling to their clothes. I don't think that's wise," she whispered, glancing around at the other shoppers. Already, she could see heads turning, curious and concerned. "People will talk. Let them talk." Michael shrugged, seemingly unbothered by the attention. "I'm more interested in learning from someone who knows what they're doing than in village gossip." The casual confidence in his voice made something tight in her chest loosen slightly. When was the last time someone had called her knowledgeable about anything? When had anyone sought her opinion as if it mattered? They approached Nina's fabric stall, where the vendor's welcoming smile died the moment she spotted Amara. Her hand moved instinctively to cover her nose, though she tried to disguise it as scratching. "Good morning, Nina," Amara said quietly, maintaining her usual 3-foot distance. "Morning." The response was clipped, professional. Nina's eyes fixed on Michael with curiosity and something like concern. "What can I help you with?" "Actually," Michael said, stepping closer to Amara despite Nina's obvious discomfort, "I was hoping my friend here could help me choose. She has an eye for quality." Friend. The word hit Amara like a physical thing, warm and impossible. Nina's eyebrows shot up, but years of merchant training kept her mouth shut. Business was business, even if the customer was making questionable associations. Michael held up a bolt of Ankara, its pattern a swirl of gold and deep blue. "What do you think of this one?" Amara forgot to maintain her distance as she leaned in to examine the fabric. Her trained fingers found the weave, testing its density. "The pattern is beautiful, but feel this." She guided his hand to a section where the fabric felt different. "See how it's already starting to pill? This wasn't printed properly. The dye will run after the first wash." "I would never have noticed that." There was genuine admiration in his voice. "What about this one?" For the next 20 minutes, Amara found herself doing something she hadn't done in years, enjoying a conversation. Michael asked real questions, listened to her answers, challenged her opinions respectfully. He treated her expertise with the same respect he might show a master craftsman. "This one," she said finally, running her palm over a deep burgundy print shot through with silver threads. "The weave is tight, the colors are set properly, and the pattern won't show wear as quickly. Your customers will think you have excellent taste." "I will, thanks to you." Michael paid Nina, who had watched their entire interaction with barely concealed amazement. As they walked away from the stall, he turned to Amara. "Can I ask you something?" Her guard went up instantly. Here it came, the question about her smell, her condition, why she covered herself so completely. "What? Would you help me pick something for my sister?" His expression was earnest, almost shy. "She's getting married next month, and I promised her something special from the eastern markets. I could pay you for your time, of course." Amara stared at him, searching his face for signs of pity, mockery, or the kind of morbid curiosity that sometimes drove people to get close to her. She found none of those things. Instead, she saw something that made her chest ache with dangerous hope, a man who genuinely valued her opinion and wanted to spend more time in her company. "You don't need to pay me," she heard herself saying. I would like to help." The smile that spread across Michael's face could have powered the entire market. As they moved deeper into the maze of stalls, neither of them noticed the whispered conversations blooming in their wake like ripples in still water. The gossip network of Ogbete Market was already spinning the tale, the cursed girl and the stranger who didn't seem to know any better. But for the first time in 12 years, Amara didn't care what people whispered. For one perfect morning, she was just a woman helping a friend, her expertise valued, her company desired. The dangerous thing about hope, she was learning, was how quickly it could take root. Raindrops struck the red earth like bullets, each one sending up a small puff of dust before the deluge began. Amara clutched her basket tighter, quickening her pace through Enugu's narrow market streets. She had maybe 3 minutes before the sky opened completely. 3 minutes to find shelter that wouldn't trap her with strangers who would hold their breath and shoot her disgusted looks. Thunder cracked overhead like the voice of Amadioha himself. Angry and unforgiving, she ducked into the nearest refuge, a half-built shop with corrugated iron sheets forming a makeshift roof. The space smelled of fresh cement and sawdust, blessedly free of human occupation. Or so she thought. Small world. Amara's heart lurched. In the dim corner, water dripping from his shirt, stood Michael. The lamplight from a nearby stall cast shifting shadows across his face, making his crooked smile seem almost mischievous. "Or maybe," he added, shaking droplets from his hair, "the spirits are trying to tell us something." The sky erupted. Rain hammered the metal roof with such violence that conversation became impossible. Amara pressed herself against the far wall, as far from Michael as the cramped space allowed. In the sudden intimacy of the shelter, with nowhere to retreat, she felt exposed in ways that had nothing to do with the storm. Here in this enclosed space, he would smell everything. The antiseptic she soaked into her headscarf each morning. The underlying sweetness of decay that no amount of washing could eliminate. The medicinal oils that stained her clothes and made fabric sellers wrinkle their noses when she touched their wares. "You don't have to stand so far away," Michael said, his voice gentle but carrying clearly despite the rain's percussion. "I promise I don't bite." "It's not that." The words came out strangled, barely audible. "It's just, people don't like to be close to me. People say many foolish things." Lightning split the darkness, turning the world white for one blazing second. In that flash, Michael saw what broke his heart, tears streaming down Amara's face, mixing with the rain that had soaked through her ever-present headscarf. Her hands trembled where they gripped her basket, knuckles pale against dark skin. "Why are you crying?" The question hung in the air like incense, heavy and inescapable. Amara tried to turn away, but there was nowhere to go. The walls pressed in, the rain trapped them. And this man, this impossibly kind man, waited with the patience of someone who understood that some truths took time to surface. "Because you're being kind to me," she whispered, her voice cracking like dry wood, "and I know it will end. It always ends when they learn the truth." "What truth?" she laughed, a sound sharp enough to cut glass. "You can't smell it, the stench that follows me everywhere? The reason no man will marry me? The reason children cross the street when they see me coming?" Her voice rose with each word, years of suppressed anguish spilling out like blood from a reopened wound. Michael was quiet for so long she thought the rain had swallowed her words. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight she'd never heard before. "I can smell something, yes." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the sincerity in his dark eyes. "But I also see a woman who measures fabric like an artist, who says thank you even when people treat her badly, who has the kindest, saddest eyes I've ever seen." Another step. "Whatever you're carrying, it's not who you are. You don't understand." Her control shattered completely. "It's not just a smell, Michael. I'm rotting, literally rotting from the inside out." The words hung between them, like a curse spoken aloud. When I was 14, she continued, the confession pouring out like water through a broken dam, what started as a small infection became something that ate through my scalp. Necrotizing fasciitis, the doctors called it. Flesh-eating bacteria. She touched her headscarf with shaking fingers. It consumed most of my scalp before they could stop it. Left me with wounds that never heal, that weep constantly and smell like... She swallowed hard. Like death. Michael listened without flinching, without the telltale tightening around his eyes that she'd learned to recognize as revulsion poorly concealed. The treatments failed. Surgery, antibiotics, skin grafts, nothing worked. My own mother moved me to a shed behind our compound because she couldn't bear the smell. Her voice dropped to a whisper. 7 men have shown interest over the years. 7 proposals that died the moment they got close enough to understand what they were dealing with. The last one actually vomited during our first meeting. Thunder rolled overhead again, but quieter now, as if even the storm was listening. I'm 26 years old, and I've never been kissed, never been held, never had someone choose to stay when they could leave. She looked up at him through her tears. So forgive me if I don't believe this kindness will last. The rain began to soften, drumming less urgently against their metal roof. In the growing quiet, Michael's footsteps seemed impossibly loud as he crossed the small space between them. He stopped just within arm's reach, close enough to touch, but careful not to crowd her. My younger brother, he said quietly, was born with a condition that made his skin peel constantly. Raw, bleeding patches everywhere. The smell was, he paused, choosing his words carefully, terrible. People said my mother had sinned, that God was punishing our family. Amara stared at him, hardly daring to breathe. He died when he was 12, not from the condition, from pneumonia that his body was too weak to fight. But those 12 years taught me something important. Michael's eyes never left hers. Suffering doesn't make someone less human, it makes them more precious. A gecko's cry pierced the evening air as Amara swept her small veranda for the 3rd time that day. Michael would arrive soon. He always came when the sun painted the sky orange, and she needed everything perfect. Not that perfection could mask what she truly was, but habits die hard. 3 weeks of evening visits. 3 weeks of careful conversation that danced around the rotting elephant in the room. She told him about her condition during that storm, yes, but somehow they'd never spoken of it again, as if words could make truth disappear. Tonight felt different, heavy, like the air before another storm. Michael appeared at the bend in the path, carrying a small wrapped package. His usual crooked smile seemed forced, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. When he settled onto the wooden stool across from her, his hands trembled slightly as he placed the package between them. You brought something, Amara observed, wrapping her arms tighter around herself. The evening breeze carried the scent of frying plantains from the main compound, a reminder of the normal life happening just beyond her exile. Palm wine, from my hometown. His voice lacked its usual warmth. I thought, we might need it tonight. The way he said need it made her stomach clench. She'd heard that tone before, from doctors delivering bad news, from suitors preparing to flee. What's wrong? Michael uncorked the calabash with unsteady fingers. The sweet, yeasty smell mingled with her ever-present medicinal odor. He took a long drink before answering. You've been wondering why I stay. It wasn't a question. His dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her shift uncomfortably. Why I don't run when the smell hits. Why I keep coming back. Amara's heart hammered against her ribs. Here it comes, the truth she'd been dreading. I assumed you were just kind. Kind. He laughed bitterly, taking another sip. My mother used to say I was kind, right up until I killed my brother. The words hung in the air like smoke. Amara stared at him, certain she'd misheard. His name was Chidi. Michael's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Born when I was 19. Beautiful baby until the rash started. First just red patches on his arms, then they began to open, weep. The doctors said it was some kind of flesh-eating bacteria, probably picked up during birth. Amara's breath caught. The description was terrifyingly familiar. By the time he was 5, the infection had spread to most of his torso. The smell. Michael closed his eyes. God, the smell, sweet and rotten, like overripe fruit mixed with metal. Our neighbors moved their children to the other side of the compound. People crossed themselves when they saw him. The gecko cried again, but neither of them noticed. Amara was transfixed by the pain etching itself across Michael's features. I was supposed to take care of him while our parents worked. But I was young, selfish. I had friends, girls I wanted to impress, so I would leave him alone for hours, telling myself he was fine. His hands clenched the calabash until his knuckles went white. One day I came home and found him collapsed. The infection had somehow reached his bloodstream. Sepsis. Mikkel, Amara whispered. He died holding my hand in that hospital bed, 7 years old, and his last words, his voice cracked. He said, "I'm sorry I smell bad, brother. I'm sorry I made people leave." Tears streamed down Amara's cheeks. She understood now, the way he looked at her, the strange lack of revulsion, the determined kindness. She was his penance. "You pity me," she said flatly. "I'm your charity case." "No." The word came out fierce, almost angry. "That's what I thought at first. When I saw you in that shop, smelled what you carry, I thought maybe God was giving me a chance to do it right this time, to not run away." He set down the calabash and leaned forward, his eyes burning with an intensity that made her pulse race. "But then I got to know you, the way you measure fabric like you're creating art. How you say please and thank you even when people treat you like dirt. The way you try to make yourself small so others feel more comfortable." His voice gentled. "I don't pity you, Amara. I see you, and what I see is the strongest person I've ever met." The space between them suddenly felt electric, dangerous. "I came here carrying my brother's ghost," he continued, his gaze never wavering. "But somewhere along the way, you became more than my redemption. You became my hope." Amara's heart threatened to burst from her chest. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever looked at her like she was precious instead of cursed. "I don't know how to trust this," she whispered. "Then don't trust it yet. Trust me." Before she could lose courage, before fear could steal the moment, Michael reached across the small space between them. His fingers hovered inches from her headscarf, the barrier she'd never allowed anyone to breach. "May I?" His voice was barely audible. The kerosene lamp flickered in Amara's shed like a dying heartbeat, casting shadows that danced across the corrugated iron walls. Outside, Enugu slept peacefully, unaware that in this tiny space behind the Okafor compound, a woman was about to expose her deepest shame to the only man who'd ever shown her kindness. Michael sat on the edge of her narrow bed, his calloused hands folded in his lap. 3 weeks had passed since the storm shelter confession. 3 weeks of evening visits, careful conversations, and the slow, terrifying bloom of something that felt dangerously close to love. But they'd never been this close. Never in her private sanctuary, where the smell was strongest, where she couldn't hide behind the safety of public spaces. "You don't have to do this," he said softly, watching her pace the small space like a caged animal. "I already know." "No." Amara's voice cut through the humid air. "You know the story. You don't know the reality." Her hands trembled as she touched the edges of her headscarf. "And if we're going to continue whatever this is, you need to see all of me." The antiseptic smell hung heavy between them, mingling with the sweet decay that no amount of cleaning could eliminate. Michael's nostrils flared slightly, an involuntary reaction he couldn't quite suppress, but his eyes never left her face. "Amara, listen to me." He stood, taking a half step toward her. "Whatever you think you need to prove, I need to know if you'll stay." The words ripped from her throat. "When you see what I really look like, when you see the thing I've become." Her fingers found the pins holding her headscarf in place. Each one felt like a small death as she removed it, the fabric loosening around her skull. Underneath, the wig was damp with medicinal solution and something else, the constant seepage that had become her body's cruel signature. "Amara?" "Don't look away." It was half command, half plea. "Please, if you look away, I'll know." The wig came off in one swift motion. Michael's breath caught, not a gasp of horror, but something deeper, more primal. In the lamplight, Amara's scalp was a landscape of devastation. Patches of scar tissue gleamed white and pink, interrupted by raw, weeping wounds that would never fully close. Where hair should have been, there were only irregular islands of damaged skin, some smooth as melted wax, others puckered and angry. The smell hit him full force now, medicinal and organic, sweet rot masked by antiseptic. But it was her face that broke his heart. The way she stood there, naked in her vulnerability, waiting for his verdict like a condemned prisoner. "This is what 14 years of infection looks like," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "This is why no man has ever, why I live alone, why children run from me, why my own mother can't bear to have me in the house." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "This is the real me, Michael, not the woman in the headscarf. This." For a moment that stretched like eternity, he was silent. Amara watched his face for the familiar signs, the involuntary step backward, the tightening around the eyes, the polite excuses that would follow. She'd seen it all before. Instead, Michael moved closer. "May I?" His hand hovered near her damaged scalp, not quite touching. Amara nodded, unable to speak. His fingers were gentle as they traced the edge of a particularly large scar, following its irregular border with the reverence of someone touching something sacred. His touch was warm, steady, completely unafraid. "Does it hurt?" "Sometimes." Her voice cracked. "But not right now." He cupped her face in both hands, thumbs brushing away her tears. In the lamplight, his eyes held no disgust, no pity, only a tenderness so profound it made her legs weak. "Do you know," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "that you're still the most beautiful woman I've ever seen?" The words hit her like a physical blow. She'd prepared for rejection, for horror, for the inevitable goodbye. She hadn't prepared for this, for acceptance so complete it felt like resurrection. "How can you say that?" she whispered. "How can you even look at me?" "Because," Michael said, pressing his forehead gently against hers, careful of the tender spots. "Beauty isn't what I see. It's what I feel when I'm with you. And what I feel, God help me, Amara, what I feel is home." In the flickering lamplight of her tiny shed, surrounded by the smell of medicine and decay, Amara Okafor discovered that miracles could happen even in the darkest places. That love could indeed see beyond scars, beyond shame, beyond everything that made her believe she was unworthy of human touch. And for the first time in 12 years, she didn't flinch when someone reached for her. The village square buzzed with the usual morning chaos. Traders hawking yams, children chasing chickens, women balancing water pots on their heads. But when Amara appeared walking beside Michael, the noise died like a candle flame in wind. Every eye turned. Every conversation stopped. They weren't touching. Amara had learned that lesson years ago. But they moved together with an intimacy that screamed louder than any embrace. Michael's hand hovered protectively near her elbow. She tilted her head toward him when he spoke. Small gestures, devastating implications. "Chukwu save us," whispered Mama Adana, clutching her rosary. "The cursed one has bewitched him." Elder Okoro stepped directly into their path, his walking stick planted like a barrier between them and the rest of the market. At 73, he'd appointed himself guardian of village morality, and his weathered face showed nothing but disgust. "Young man," his voice carried across the square, "do you know what walks beside you?" Michael's jaw tightened. "I know exactly who walks beside me." "Then you know she carries death in her very skin. The stench that follows her is a medical condition." Miko's voice cut like a blade. "Not a curse, not a punishment from God, an illness." The elder's laugh was bitter. "Illness? My boy, no natural illness smells like rotting corpses. This woman has a name." The words hung in the air like thunder before lightning. Amara felt every gaze burning into her skin, felt the familiar urge to disappear, to apologize for existing. But Michael's presence beside her held her steady. "Her name is Amara," he continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the square, "and she's going to be my wife." The silence that followed was absolute. Not even the goats bleating in the distance dared break it. Then the eruption came. "Abomination!" Someone shouted. "He's lost his mind. The demons have taken him too." Within an hour, the compound of Amara's family resembled a battlefield. Her mother, Nkechi, sat on a wooden stool, tears streaming down her cheeks as village women surrounded her with a mixture of sympathy and barely concealed horror. My daughter, Nkechi whispered. What have you done? Amara knelt before her mother, the familiar shame crushing her chest. Mama, you've cursed this man, don't you see? Nkechi's voice cracked. First you cursed yourself, now you want to curse him too? She hasn't cursed anyone. Michael stood in the compound center, unmoved by the hostile crowd gathering around them, and she didn't ask me to love her. I chose it. Uncle Chike, Nkechi's eldest brother, stepped forward. As head of the extended family, his word carried weight. Boy, you don't understand what you're asking for. This girl, she's not like other women. The smell alone will fade when her condition is properly treated. The crowd murmured. Someone laughed harshly. Properly treated? Elder Okoro had followed them from the market. You think our doctors haven't tried? You think her own family would live with this shame if there was any cure? Your doctors, Michael said quietly, may not have access to the specialists in Lagos or the new treatments available in Abuja. Dr. Emeka's clinic sat at the edge of the village, a modest building that served 3 communities and chronically lacked supplies. When the crowd descended on him, demanding answers about Amara's condition, the young doctor looked like he wanted to disappear into his stethoscope. The girl's case, he began nervously, glancing at Amara, who stood pressed against the wall like a cornered animal. It's complex. The necrotizing fasciitis damaged too much tissue. The infection keeps returning because you don't have the right equipment, Michael interrupted, or the right medications. Dr. Emeka's eyes sharpened. You know medicine? My brother died from a similar condition. I've researched everything. Michael pulled a folded paper from his pocket, printouts from internet cafes in Onitsha, articles he'd been studying for weeks. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy, specialized wound care, plastic reconstruction. None of that is available here. The doctor scanned the papers, his expression shifting from skepticism to surprise to something approaching hope. These treatments, they're expensive and far away. I have money and a truck. Uncle Chike snorted. You would waste your fortune on this cursed girl? I would invest my fortune in the woman I love. The proposal came at sunset, in front of everyone who gathered to witness what they assumed would be Michael's inevitable retreat to sanity. He knelt in the red dust of the compound, pulling a simple gold ring from his pocket. Not the elaborate ceremony most families expected, but something raw and immediate that cut through all pretense. Amara Okafor, he said, his voice steady despite the hostile crowd pressing around them. I know what I'm asking. I know what people will say. I know the challenges we'll face. He looked up at her, and his eyes held no doubt. But I also know that in 6 weeks of knowing you, you've made me feel more alive than I have in years. Will you marry me? The silence stretched like a held breath. Amara stared down at him, this man who'd seen her at her worst and somehow found her beautiful. The ring glinted in the fading light. Not expensive, but real, solid, like the love he offered. The whole village is watching, she whispered. Let them watch. Her mother's voice cut through the tension, soft but carrying. Amara, a man who loves you like this. Nkechi wiped her eyes, looking at her daughter kneeling in the dust, at the man who'd followed her into shame without flinching. Maybe the gods sent him. The words hung in the air like a blessing, like permission. Amara looked around at the faces surrounding them, some disgusted, some curious, some beginning to soften into something approaching wonder. All her life, she'd hidden from these stares. Tonight, she met them head on. Yes, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Yes, I'll marry you. When Michael slipped the ring onto her finger, someone in the crowd began to clap. Slowly, others joined. Not everyone, but enough to believe in miracles. The morning sun cast long shadows across the small compound as Amara sat before the cracked mirror in her mother's house. For the first time in 12 years, she wasn't wearing her headscarf. Her reflection stared back, half beautiful woman, half medical nightmare. The left side of her face remained untouched, smooth skin catching the light like polished bronze. But where her hairline should have begun, angry scar tissue stretched across her scalp in thick, ropey ridges. The skin wept constantly, a thin yellow fluid that no amount of gauze could fully contain. You don't have to do this, her mother whispered, hands trembling as she held the white head wrap they'd chosen for the ceremony. It wasn't the elaborate jele of a traditional Igbo bride. Amara had insisted on something simple, something that wouldn't hide what she was. Yes, I do. Amara's voice was steadier than it had ever been. He's seen me, all of me. If I hide now, I'll be hiding for the rest of our marriage. Through the window, she could see the small gathering assembling under the ancient Iroko tree. Only 15 people, Michael's immediate family, her mother and 2 aunts who'd finally found the courage to attend, and surprisingly 3 neighbors who'd asked if they could witness the miracle wedding, as they'd begun calling it. Mama Ngozi was among them, the same woman who'd whispered about curses and demons just months ago. Yesterday, she'd approached Amara in the market with tears in her eyes. I was wrong about you, my daughter, wrong about many things. That man of yours, he sees with different eyes than the rest of us. The smell still followed Amara everywhere. It always would, but something had shifted in how people responded to it. Maybe it was watching Michael interact with her so naturally, so tenderly. Maybe it was seeing her smile for the first time in years, watching her walk with her head slightly higher. Whatever it was, the whispers had changed. Where once they spoke of curses, now they wondered about love that could see past flesh. Where once they saw a demon, now they saw a woman who'd suffered more than most, but somehow found joy anyway. Are you ready? Michael appeared in the doorway, and Amara's breath caught. He wore a simple white shirt and dark trousers. No elaborate agbada, no family regalia. Just a man coming to claim his bride exactly as she was. His eyes swept over her uncovered head without flinching, without that microsecond of revulsion she'd learned to watch for in people's faces. Instead, he smiled with such pure joy that she felt tears spill over. You're beautiful, he said, and she knew he meant it. Not despite her scars, not in spite of her condition, just beautiful, full stop. The ceremony was brief but profound. Pastor Okafor spoke about love that mirrors God's own, unconditional, transformative, redemptive. When they exchanged vows, Amara's voice carried across the compound, clear and strong. I promise to love you not because you see past my flaws, she said, looking directly into Michael's eyes, but because you help me see past them too. When he kissed her, several people openly wept. Mama Ngozi was loudest among them. Later, as evening painted the sky in shades of gold and purple, they sat on the veranda of their small house, the same shed where Amara had lived in isolation, now transformed into a home. Michael had spent weeks expanding it, adding windows to let in light, building a proper kitchen where they could cook together. Do you think they'll remember us? Amara asked, leaning against his shoulder as they watched the last wedding guests disappear down the dusty road. The children especially. Do you think seeing us together will change how they think about people who are different? Michael was quiet for a moment, his hand gently stroking the damaged skin of her scalp, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. Maybe, but even if it doesn't, we'll remember, we'll know that love is possible even here, even like this. A cool breeze carried the scent of evening flowers, temporarily masking the ever-present smell of her condition. In the distance, they could hear children playing, their laughter echoing off compound walls. My grandmother used to say something, Michael murmured. Some wounds never heal, but love makes them sacred. He tilted her face up to meet his gaze. I understand that now. Your pain isn't something to fix or hide. It's part of what makes you who you are. Part of what I fell in love with. Amara felt something loosen in her chest, a knot of shame she'd carried for so long she'd forgotten it was there. For 12 years she'd believed her condition made her unlovable. But sitting here in her husband's arms, surrounded by the quiet sounds of a village settling into sleep, she understood something profound. She hadn't needed healing. She'd needed seeing. The infection would continue. The smell would persist. There would be difficult days ahead, moments when the old shame tried to resurface. But they would face it together, not as a man rescuing a broken woman, but as 2 people who'd found in each other exactly what they'd been searching for. As night deepened around them, Amara smiled into the darkness. Tomorrow, the children would see her walking hand in hand with her husband, her head uncovered, her dignity intact. Maybe one of them, The shy girl who limped, the boy with the port wine birthmark, the child everyone whispered about, would see and remember. Maybe they'd remember that love, real love, doesn't require perfection. It only requires courage. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts.